Hi mate, it's been a tough few days, huh? A tough few weeks, a tough few months. You've ended a relationship with someone who was once a very important part of your life. Someone who maybe you imagined a future with. But now that person is gone and the future seems very uncertain and scary. Added to that, you've probably been feeling emotions you've never felt before. Emotions that are very overwhelming and difficult to manage. I want to be upfront with you from the get-go, and I want to tell you that you will get over this breakup, and you will be able to process it. But in order to do so, I need you to first accept one thing, and that is, whatever you're feeling right now is incredibly normal. You're not flawed, you're not a failure, you're not weak, you're not damaged because of what you feel. You're a human being going through the natural process of grief. My name's Lewis. It's a pleasure to have you here. Now look, I don't want there to be any surprises for you in this video, so this is exactly what we're going to cover in the next few minutes of your time. Number one, we'll cover what grief actually is, plus the stages of grief you will inevitably go through. Then we'll cover how to practically deal with grief. We're going to cover something called gremlins and autopilots, loss aversion and sunk cost fallacy, because there's two things I want you to really know when it comes to the brain. There's likely two questions on your mind. How long will it take? Question mark. And how can you tell when you're over it? Finally, we'll finalise with a bonus tip, acting opposite, and then I'm going to give you some recommended reading to help you steer the ship through the storm. Are you ready? Right, let's do this together. I'm glad you're here. First up, we have grief and the stages of grief. I just want to preface everything we're about to go through with, you don't have to remember any of this. I just want you to calmly absorb the information and see what sticks. Grief is the natural process you go through when you lose something that was significant to you. That could be anything. It could be a job, it could be someone to death, it could be a significant relationship in this context we're talking about. Usually the emotions that arise during grief are extreme sadness, anger, perhaps depression as well, a feeling of apathy where you just can't be bothered to do anything. Maybe you just want to curl up into a ball all day and just lay there. All of these are absolutely fine. Now, when it comes to the grief you currently feel in regards to your breakup, there are likely three things you're grieving. Number one, the physicality of the person, so having them around, touching them, smelling them, whatever. Number two, the certainty of the future that you had with this person. Again, maybe the grand plans that you had together or that you had in your imagination. And lastly, your idea of who you thought this person was. Now again, I want to reiterate the point. Whatever you're feeling in your grief is incredibly normal. And everyone grieves differently. So if you've seen any videos on the internet or spoken to anyone in real life and they've told you how you should be grieving, ignore them. Everyone has their different ways of grieving. Grief is the price we pay for love, and it has a heavy emotional tax. But the interesting thing is that the things that help us understand and process our grief, which we'll get into next, don't force us to remove our grief or what we feel, or force us to forget what happened. Nor does dealing with your grief mean you block out emotions, because usually when you block out one emotion, you block them all, meaning you feel numb and hollow. And furthermore, unhealthy ways of dealing with your grief are behaviours that result in short-term highs but long-term lows. Think addictive substances such as alcohol or drugs. Listen mate, be very careful during your process of grief of relying on things that give you a short-term release from what you think or what you feel, because you might feel like you're helping yourself in the moment, but you're not. You're delaying the process days, months and years into the future. Okay, I've got an analogy for you. Think about it this way. Feeling your grief is just like going out to sea. Gradually, you expose yourself to the water or the sea of grief by allowing yourself to feel whatever arises, and then you return to the shore of safety. Bit by bit, you don't make the grief disappear, but you increase your strength and your capability to face it and then return to your normal everyday life. The shore of safety. To go one step deeper, I want to explain one more thing about grief. You can also think about grief as a map with three core components that during your process of getting over the breakup, you will need to remap. 1. Space. So where is this person physically? 2. Time. When will I see this person next? And number 3, your closeness, so the attachment style you had to this person. I want you to bear these 3 aspects of how you'll need to reorient yourself towards this other person throughout the process of your breakup in mind when we go through these next practical steps. Okay, chances are you might have heard about the stages of grief before, but just in case you haven't, let's go through them now. Now, as we mentioned, everyone grieves differently, but there are some distinct phases you will go through. Up first, even though these don't always happen in a numerical order, is denial. This is where you refuse to accept the reality of the situation. Next, we have anger. A very normal emotion to feel in this process, but interestingly enough, anger usually hides fear and sadness. You might feel angry at yourself, you might feel angry at this other person or those around you. Whatever the case, of course, it's normal. The best way to deal with anger, one, is not to sit in your room and ruminate on all of your angry thoughts, but move, then relax. Anger wants you to move, hence it fuels you with that charged up energy. So do a high volume workout, go for a run, go for a walk, vent to people who can hold space for you, or talk to yourself out loud to get those heavy emotions off your chest, and then tap into the deep relaxation practices such as meditation, journaling, breath work, or whatever floats your boat. The next stage is bargaining. This is where you engage all of your what-if thoughts, thinking back to the past with hindsight. That usually manifests as self-blame, beating yourself up about things you either did or didn't do. You might even try to negotiate with the universe or a god who you believe in. No matter what you do when you're bargaining, you're trying to change the way reality is. The second to last stage is depression. This is where you experience intense feelings of loss, sadness, or emptiness. Remember, you might have days where you just don't want to do anything and you want to curl up into a ball and just cry, vent, or reflect. And the last stage is acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean the grief goes away. It just means you begin opening yourself to new connections and experiences as you work through the grief. Your attempts to change the way reality is or deny what is happening dissolve. It means you accept that there will be waves of grief in the future, but it doesn't mean you're okay with the situation, because you might not be okay with it, but it means you accept the way reality is, because no amount of bargaining, guilt, denial, or anger will change it. Moving on, you still with me? Good. Let's continue. Okay, now let's cover the 6 practical ways you can deal with grief, but before I just want to mention that dealing with grief largely involves the movement between allowing yourself to feel whatever emotions arise naturally and then giving yourself some distraction and respite from your emotions by replenishing your mind and body in soothing and comforting ways. First up, feel whatever is there. Just to reiterate the point, no matter what you feel, everything is okay. If one day you feel incredibly happy and joyous because the sun is shining on your face, that's fine. So too is it if you feel like you want to do nothing all day and just curl up into a ball and loop around. If you feel incredibly angry, or if you accept an invitation from your friends to go out and play football and you have one of the best days you've had in a while, everything is okay. Number 2, small steps forward each day. If, during this process, waking up in the mornings and brushing your teeth feels like a monumental challenge equivalent to Sisyphus pushing that big boulder up the hill, then celebrate that. That becomes your goal. You need to enact humility here and understand that if doing something as small as this is difficult to do right now, this becomes the focus. Just waking up and brushing your teeth. Don't think about how you should be dealing with this or how other people think you should be dealing with this. Start small. Which leads us into point number 3, no expectations. Do not accept expectations from yourself or other people as to how you should be dealing with this. When I went through a breakup about 2 or 3 years ago, I had no idea how to manage any of it. Everything was new. Most of the emotions I was feeling was completely new. I had no frame of reference from any breakup I went through before because I'd never experienced it. But I started to throw expectations onto myself of, oh, I'm a man, I should be dealing with this like this, or in a much better way, I feel weak, and all of that stuff. It wasn't until I got rid of all the expectations and just started to naturally follow the process that my body and mind was revealing to me that I was able to process the breakup much quicker. So no expectations, not from yourself or anyone. Number 4, express what you're feeling inside in new creative ways. through creativity. You might consider going to therapy. That was quite helpful for me. I went to 5 sessions and it helped me get a lot of the emotions that were quite heavy off my chest. Writing was also something I used. I used to write letters to myself, which really helped me steer the ship. Walking, if you've watched this channel before, boys and girls, you know that I'm a big fan of walking and talking to yourself out loud. Dancing, a new hobby, whatever it is that allows you to creatively express what's going on up here. 2 more. Number 5, remember and keep living. A peculiar thing that happens when you go through a breakup is as you start to rebuild your life and your identity by doing new things that make you feel good, you start to feel guilty for doing those things because it feels at odds with remembering this other person. But progress in getting over this breakup involves a balance between these two things. Rebuilding your life and feeling guilty for it sometimes, and remembering this other person. You feel these two feelings, but you continue living anyway. Number 6, finally, grow around the wound. I'm going to be honest with you, mate. You don't fix your grief, and you don't get rid of it. What you do is you rebuild your life around it. I would have drawn the grief hole bigger, but running out of black pen. As you rebuild your identity and you engage in new experiences, you simply rebuild your life around the wound of your grief, and you're then able to put your grief in a new perspective, and the emotional tax it has on you begins to decrease over time. Now, the last thing we're going to cover before we finalise this video is something called the pillars of strength, all of which help you maintain your mental health while all of this is going on. Number 1 is structure. We all have an inner need for consistency and predictability, and it is your structure, your consistent routine and schedule that you will be able to rely on when your emotions are going a bit haywire. So continue your life as normal, or instill habits at a certain time that you can do each day to help you steer the ship. And over time, carry out this structure regardless of how you feel. Because remember, you need to lean into the emotion and then rely on things that allow you some respite from feeling. Number 2 is limits. One of the tricky things about going through a breakup in our day and age is we have access to social media, which means after you break up with someone, you can still see everything they're doing. So here's a little bit of advice from your internet brother from another mother. Unfollow this person. I would suggest you do so because it's going to rupture and impede your ability to get over them. If you're constantly seeing updates about what they're doing, you're still going to have that psychological hook and attachment onto them. If you live in the same city as them or you live close to them, there is nothing wrong with avoiding going to places where they might be, because seeing them, while all of this is quite fresh and raw, will likely upset the process. Seeing them again after you've processed all of this stuff will have a completely different effect. But while everything is still raw, you're likely to still be emotionally triggered when you see them. Also, limit your contact. If they keep bombarding you with messages, then now is the time to set boundaries. Not because you're selfish, but because you're choosing yourself and you're taking care of your mental health. I know everyone has different opinions on limits, but me personally, what helped me was not speaking to the person at all. Number 3, mind and body. Now is your opportunity to really take care of your physical realm and your mental fortitude. You might start working out. You might start cultivating deep rest practices such as breath work or meditation or journaling. Like I said, walking and talking to yourself out loud, going to therapy and things of that sort. But mainly taking care of your physical and your mental health now is a great way to get over a breakup. Hence, most people get jacked after they go through a breakup because it works. And lastly, self-reflection. Now is your time to rebuild your relationship with yourself. Rebuild your identity, because one of the things you also grieve about is the identity you had when you was with this person. That is no longer available to you. So now you get to recreate your identity in whatever aspect you would like to, from scratch. And do not see these practices as selfish. You are taking care of yourself. Okay, we've got 6 more points before we finalise this video, but these points are very short and brief, so we're going to speed through them. Just quickly, I want to introduce you to 2 types of thoughts we have: gremlins and autopilots. Gremlins, throughout this process, are the thoughts that are going to trip you up, and they usually involve the word should and an unhealthy expectation. An autopilot is a healthy expectation and a way of calming yourself down. When I was going through a breakup, I spent a whole summer just reprogramming my gremlins for autopilots, and that's what helped me. Now, a gremlin I had, which you might have right now, is I should be dealing with this perfectly. Replace it with I can only try my best and work with whatever I feel. Second of all, I should always know what to do. That's a tough one. I'm not always going to make the best decision, but I can learn from my mistakes. Number 3, I'll never be the same without them. Another tough one. Most people do get over breakups. I was okay before I met this person, and I'll be okay after, even if it takes time. Write out your gremlins, counteract them with the autopilots, and read them every day. I cannot tell you how important this is. If there's one thing you get from this video, just do this. Now, there's 2 things I want you to understand about your brain, which is going to play devil's advocate on a lot of what you're thinking right now. There are 2 things I want to quickly introduce you to, which will serve as a thought experiment for you to do after this video. There are 2 cognitive biases which are heavily at play when you break up with someone. Now, a cognitive bias is something our brain does to influence our behaviour. What loss aversion is you are more motivated to avoid losing something than you are to gain something. Simply put, if I gave you the option of avoiding losing £10 or I could give you £10, you will be more motivated to avoid losing £10. Now, the scary thing is, when I went through my first breakup, it took me about 3 months after the breakup happened and me wanting to maintain contact with the person that I realised I was just motivated to avoid losing something. Second of all, sunk cost fallacy is when we put a significant amount of time, effort, or love into something, we're more motivated to continue doing it. For example, you might have been with this person for 4 years, but the relationship didn't work out and you both weren't looking in the same direction, just as a hypothetical. But this cognitive bias makes you reflect on those 4 years and think, wait, I can't break up with this person because that would mean those 4 years of my life would have been a complete waste. This is sunk cost fallacy. But to tell whether you should continue being in this relationship with this person, don't think about the benefits this relationship has already brought you. Think about the potential benefits, or lack thereof, this relationship could bring you if you continue it. It's a scary thing to realise you're just trying to maintain a relationship to avoid these 2 things, but I just wanted to mention it because the sooner you realise it, the better. Okay, quick fire. How long will it take? It will take as long as you take to start prioritising your mental health and your personal growth. That's what I would say. Outside of that answer, on average it takes people 2 to 3 months to get over a breakup. Most importantly, how can you tell when you're over this person? I'll elaborate with a little anecdote. About 8 or 9 months after my breakup happened, I was living in a place called Bristol with my cousin Brandon, who is a similar age to me, and he had recently been through a breakup about 4 months before we moved in with each other. And what we used to do is we used to walk through a park at night and just talk about life and philosophise. But suddenly, during one conversation we had, I said to Brandon, do you know what? I wish her all the best, and I pray that nothing but good happens to her. Speaking about my ex. And it was in that moment, it clicked, and I realised I'm over it. And then my cousin reflected on whether he was over his relationship, and he still had some anger and resentment directed towards his ex. So my answer as to how can you tell when you're over this person is you're over this person when you can wish them the best without any feelings of anger or resentment or you wanting them to perceive you a certain way. Okay, let's finally finalise with a bonus tip. Act opposite. The thing about emotions is they love themselves in the sense that they will force us to act in ways that make that emotion more intense. But emotions are also just like a fire in the sense that when you stop throwing logs on a fire, the fire will eventually fade out. So if you cannot stop thinking about your ex and your love for them, but that is now getting in the way of your life, follow this process. First, become aware of what you feel by labeling it. Is it sadness? Is it longing? Is it desperation? Is it love? And then unpack how that manifests. So ask yourself, what does it look like when you express love for this person? How do you act when you think about your ex with these loving sensations? What do you feel? What do you think? What facial expressions come up and what body language do you exhibit? Thinking about how your love for them manifests will enable you to become aware. Second of all, validate what you feel. Don't deny it. You might say, of course I feel this way towards them. This is natural. And then act opposite. When you act opposite to an emotion, you have to first outline the urge that that emotion wants you to act upon. For example, after you've become aware and validated your intense feeling of longing for this other person, that longing wants you to reach out to them. Acting opposite could look like, list the reasons your ex isn't good for you. Avoid all contact. Avoid all warm and flirty interactions with them, especially. Physically distract yourself from obsessive thoughts. Go for a walk, do a workout, get yourself into your body. Replace gremlins for autopilots. Calm your body with paced breathing. Exhale longer than you inhale. Consume anti-romantic love content. Don't start watching loads of romantic films. Number 7, pursue other kinds of love. It's not just romantic love that we have in our life. You can rekindle the love in your family, your self-love. Agape, as the Greeks would call it. Agape is love of God, I believe. So become aware of the emotion, validate it, and then notice. Do you want to reduce the effect of this emotion because it's having negative effects on your life? Yes, okay. Find out the urge of that emotion, then do the opposite action. Okay, there's nothing else to mention other than some books I want to recommend you to help you guide your ship through the storm. There are loads of books I would love to recommend you, but in order to keep it simple, there were only 2 that helped me when I went through a breakup. Number 1, stillness is the key. This idea of being like the great rock in the ocean that the waves crash upon and yet the rock stands still amidst it all was so appealing to me when I had such psychological chaos going on within and emotions were going haywire. Just cultivating this feeling of stillness, this will be your guide on how to do so. The other book, last one, I don't have the copy, but The Chimp Paradox. This will help you gain a better understanding as to the parts of your brain that are going haywire and that you need to calm down, and it will give you plenty of actionable tools you can use to help calm something called your chimp brain. I did make a video on it, so feel free to check that up here. Otherwise, type your experiences in the comments. Let us know how you're doing. If you've been through a breakup before, let us know what helps you. Let's all band together and really help each other. Stay disciplined, playful, and dangerous. Adios, muchachos y muchachas.